Welcome to Action Cut and Everything in Between, episode number 9. We are back. I've been taking a bit of a time off, bit of a hiatus, because the thing with this indie film business is that we all have lives away from the films, and unfortunately, we need to eat. So I've been trying to build myself up here in the UK, and that's taken a bit longer than I was expecting. So the podcast, unfortunately, had to go on the back burner, but things are starting to level out now, so I've got loads of cool guests lined up, and hoping to pump these out on a more regular basis from now on. So thanks for hanging on in there. This week I've got a great interview for you all from a very good friend of mine from Australia. His name is Mike Garrick. He's been directing commercials for many years, and now he's turned his hand to feature film directing. So we're going to talk about his movie Yesterday's Girl. So let's jump right in and let's have a chat with him.
Welcome to Action Cut and Everything in Between, a comprehensive guide to shooting a feature film all on your own.
All right, Mike, how are you, mate? Welcome to the show.
Greetings from Australia.
How's the weather there?
Getting hot.
Yeah? I heard it's like 27 or something today, and that's like
27.
spring. It's only spring, isn't it? So
yeah, and they're forecasting a really hot weekend.
Oh, okay.
It's getting a bit like UK summers.
That's it. Well, I doubt it. We've got torrential rain at the moment. We're getting hit by like tail end of a hurricane or something. So I'm having to wash the dog every day after walks. So it's a bit of a pain, but got to do what you got to do.
You do.
So, all right. So let's get into it. So tell us a bit about you, your background. What have you been up to over the years?
My background is I've been around a little while, a couple of decades. I'm a director who makes TV commercials and have been doing that for a little while. So basically, I got into this business to actually start doing my own work. And I thought after 20 or so years, I thought, Mike, maybe it's time you started doing your own work and not other people's work. So fortunately, I've directed big commercials, McDonald's and those sort of things. And having done that, I really felt time I should be doing other stuff, my own stuff. So with that, I started looking around for projects, did a couple of short films, completed a feature, which was for 4 or 5 years in the making, won some LA Film Awards. And so here I am today, trying to get the next projects up and running.
Yeah, cool. So how did you actually make the jump from commercials to a feature film? I mean, did you do any shorts or anything like that, or was it just the commercial experience that? I
did some shorts, just dipping my toe in and seeing whether it was really what I wanted, whether I wanted to persevere with it. Of course, it was highly unprofitable doing shorts, which is a different world from doing commercials, and I made a successful business out of doing commercials in a fairly small nation of only 24, 25 million people. So out of that, I decided, okay, I'm going to try for a feature. So I heard of a feature that needed work, needed someone, and so I sort of helped out on that, and that took 4.5 years.
Okay, and that was Yesterday's Girl?
Correct, Yesterday's Girl, yes.
Okay, great.
As we were shooting, we noticed the ground changing under our feet, that i.e. cinema distribution was a dying business model. So based on that, we had to change the formula a bit and try and make something that could work on other platforms.
Okay. So what would that difference be then? Like if you say theatrical?
More commercial.
Okay.
Some more commercial, I guess, ideally. I guess in Australia, and I'm talking from Australia's point of view here, we have a nation of 24, 25 million people. In a theatrical business model, that model does not work very well at 24 million, 25 million, I don't believe. Coming from a commercial production point of view where I sort of know the sums and I know what's needed to make a living out of it. So based on that, Australia, we had to really go for a global audience.
So what did you actually change to do that? Can you go into that in a bit more detail?
I guess we put in some effects and made the message a lot more global in terms of message. As opposed to Australian. And, having said that, it worked. We got global distribution. So we were happy with that.
Yeah, okay, nice. So the moment you came on board to where it is now then, how long's the time period?
Be about 4 or 5 years, I think.
4 or 5 years, okay. And how long from when you joined did you actually get to start shooting then? What was the process from getting the script where it was?
2 days. 2 days. Yeah. Big 2 days.
Yeah, wow.
2 days prep. Fortunately, look, it's an indie film, micro budget, and we were shooting on weekends. And that's, for filmmakers, that's a fantastic thing. I'm a firm believer after fairly substantial production experience that the more pre-production you do, the better off you are. So we were using the weeks in between the weekends to actually pre-produce each number of scenes we were shooting on the weekend.
Yeah.
And that was an enormous help in creating fairly formidable logistics, solving fairly heavy logistics solutions. We had a cast, I think, of 300 at one stage, 300, 250, a whole lot of extras, wow. Not principal cast. And we could only do that by having that time in between the shoots to organise for the next weekend.
Yeah, wow. And were you cutting in between? Were you managing to get any edits together in those weeks?
We were doing really, really rough, what I call slap it down cuts. But primarily, whilst we were shooting, we were searching for an editor.
Okay, yeah.
And that editor we found in Melbourne. And he was great. And he brought on board a whole lot of brought on a couple of other people who really helped us out. And strangely enough, the assistant editor, who used to live a couple of blocks away from where I live, used to live in Newcastle. She was in Melbourne. She was assistant editor on Hacksaw Ridge and a couple of other things.
Okay, nice. So you mentioned just before we came on about it was a kind of global team.
Yeah, and so that was one thing I was very conscious of working in commercials is it's very easy to stitch together, not just rely on your local filmmaking network. So I was very much interested in leveraging people who could bring fairly unique skills into the film. So pretty much, as I mentioned, we use our editorial team, which was in Melbourne. Melbourne is about 1,200 kilometres away from where I live. We also used our composer was in Norway, and we also used VFX out of Nevada, and plus a whole lot of other things as well, where we're sort of, given the web nowadays, everyone is instantly connectable through Skype, or contactable, I should say, through Skype or any other mediums, any other platforms that are around. And pretty much you've got the world at your fingertips, and it's just a matter of finding those people.
Yeah, nice. So when you came on board, was the funding already organised and arranged?
To a point it was, and we sort of supplemented some of that. I guess there's just an awful lot of man hours went into that production. More man hours than money.
Yeah, it's always the way.
Which I'm sure you know something about.
So did the funding come from various sources?
It was all private.
All private. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have any experience for people who are looking for funding, kind of avenues that they should try to go, certain people to approach?
No, not really, because every film is, or every project is unique. Just basically, I was very conscious that in Australia we have finite resources in terms of film funding, but there is a whole world out there that is waiting to be accessed just through other means. So I spent a fair bit of time trying to research that and find people who want to come onto the project for not a lot of funding, not a lot of money. So that's what we did.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to the film Yesterday's Girl, then, any major challenges on set that you faced?
Again, this comes down to pre-production. I don't think so. The hardest things were organising fairly big locations, getting OH&S and those sort of things signed off on, making sure we had permission to be in there and making sure there were no legal issues. But again, I stress that with that week's pre-production, we could actually sort a lot of that out. And we weren't just sorting out the following weekend's shoot. We could sort out, a month in advance what we're going to be in a month's time, get our legals signed off on locations and all those sort of things.
Yeah, okay, nice. What was that location? It looked like a big, this big mechanical factory thing. Looked like a car making plant.
Yeah, that was I can't mention their name, but it was a mothballed aluminium smelter, 100-acre site. Because of my commercial production experience, I know a location when I see one, so I actually fronted them, and we basically had the run of a 100-acre site with millions of dollars worth of manufacturing, scaffolding, you name it, for 2 to 3 days.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that looks amazing. That. So once the film was all shot and you moved into post, what was the kind of process for that?
Okay, I guess at some stage, and it's all a little bit hazy now, but at some stage when Eyal came on board and started editing scenes, we were getting pretty close towards completion and of shooting, and we were adding in scenes, and Eyal was editing, and then we were toing and throwing between me and him, just working out what was working, what wasn't. That was all happening offline. That was all happening through Avid. I know other people have used other systems. I would strongly recommend Avid in this situation, because at the end of the day, I think we had over 35,000 different files in the project, and when you start getting up in those numbers, and our project isn't big by any means, when you start getting up into those numbers, you start getting issues, particularly with other software platforms. I'm not going to mention their name.
And then, so the kind of composer and all that, they were all organized before in principle.
Composer was being organised at the time we were shooting.
Yeah.
So he agreed to come on board. He had a piece of music which we really liked, so I negotiated rights to use that music within the film. And then one night, sitting in edit, and suddenly realising that 4 minutes worth of music is not going to fill a feature film, I thought, holy dooly, what do I do now? So basically, I then organised the choir and organised the choir master to actually compose to the original track. And then we did an audio session of a couple of hours. And then basically I went away. I have musical experience, and actually then created, I think, about 48 minutes worth of additional music on top of the original soundtrack. Original track that Tico Lasola actually composed, and Tico was fantastic. He was all on board on that, and we got really big soundtrack for not a lot of dollars, which I was really surprised to do. But it just reinforced to me the power of collaboration at an international level, because if you imagine, the composer was in Norway, I was in Newcastle, the sound studio with the choir was also in Newcastle, and I was using a Conservatorium of Music in Newcastle. We were sort of collaborating, and it all came together in 2 to 3 hours in a sound studio.
And I noticed online the other day that the soundtrack's available to download, isn't it? So yes. Where can people find that?
That's on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon.
Yeah, cool. All the big players.
So it's on all the major platforms. Type in Yesterday's Girl and you'll call up the soundtrack.
Yeah, nice. I'll have to have a listen today.
I guess the other thing we could talk about is we also were graced with a post-production company here in Newcastle that sort of made a specialty of doing indie projects. And so we did what's called DI, which is called Digital Intermediate, which is basically creating the master file for what we call DCP or cinema release, and for then distribution to our distributor, who then distributes onto Amazon Prime or whoever has the rights to show it. And so that we were lucky in that respect. I guess there's plenty of post houses that do want to do these sort of projects if you talk to them nicely, I think, and if you have your act together.
Yeah, cool. That's good advice. Don't be afraid to ask, because you never know.
Yeah, well, DI is a fundamental. It's basically the capping on the foundation of the film to actually get it out there. And if it's what we call deliverables, and if deliverables aren't met, then the distributor can't accept the film.
Yeah. Okay.
And creates a whole lot of problems like color grading if it's not right, if it's not in P3 color space, a whole lot of issues like that.
Yeah. Okay. Lots to do, isn't there? That a lot of people probably don't even think about.
No, they don't think about, and then they get caught at the end when they've spent all this time and there's rejections or there's legal issues with sound and those sort of things.
Yeah, even probably the smallest sound effect that you've got in there will have to be kind of signed off and approved, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I guess that depends on your sound suite, but yes, you're right. I guess, fortunately, a lot of our stuff was created. It's not, and a lot of other stuff was recorded naturally. So we're pretty lucky in that respect, but you're right.
Yeah.
You've got to check all your sound files. Yeah.
Did you do like a Foley session?
We did Foley sessions, yes. Foley sessions, I think everyone needs to do. There's always, because you're working on such a tight budget, there's always things that need polishing. And for whatever reason, sometimes the vision's right, but the sound's terrible, or the sound's right, but the vision's terrible. And you've got to sort of see what's going to work and then correct either one or the two. So I guess the other thing we did, which was a little bit different, but the Americans do it, is after a pretty solid shoot schedule, I think we shot for 40 days. After reviewing edits, we did what we call pickup shots. Everyone knows pickup shots, but what we did at the end of the editing process, and we knew exactly what we needed, and we inserted those into the edit to actually cover a whole lot of production faults, and it worked really well.
Yeah, cool.
So it's a good way to do it. Don't lock off your vision until after your final edit, then decide if you need a couple of pickup shots. And pickup shots are nothing. They can be a hand holding a pen, knife, gun, loading a bullet. They can be anything.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so the film's all in the can, it's wrapped, everything's signed off, and now you've got to look at distribution. So what was the kind of process for you? Did you do any festivals?
Okay, with our film, generally what happens with these low budget films, indie films are done to go on the festival circuit in the hope of being picked up. We didn't do that because I know there's an awful lot of films that aren't being picked up. So we actually decided, right, we're going to do it differently. The business model, that's a 20th century business model. We're going 21st century. We're going to find a distributor. So basically we jumped on the plane to the US, and we talked to quite a few distributors, and we got picked up for distribution. So yes, we got played at a few festivals, but that wasn't really the deal for us. Our deal was always fixated on getting distribution.
And that was at the American film market?
Yeah, AFM. Yes.
Yeah, cool.
That was a couple of years ago.
What do distributors think if you've already done a couple of festivals? Do they have any kind of problems with that because the film is...
No, we hadn't released it. I was very much aware, and that's a really good point. I would never release to a festival until after I've spoken to distributors.
Okay.
Because what you're actually doing is interrupting their own release pattern or release, let's say, schedule. And they are wary of accepting something that's already being released.
Yeah, okay.
I had another friend who actually had done that, gone festival release, and was getting feedback from distributors, well, you've released it, it's a bit hard for us to do anything.
Wow, okay. Well, great point there then.
Well, the journey for me as a director is I'm not actually the producer on it. So I've left the distribution with the producer, and he is in the process of talking with our distributors about the best release pattern, the best release strategies for that. I guess the thing I would say is we are not releasing theatrically. Theatrical release for indie low budget films, I believe, is really not viable. You may get a week release in a cinema here or there, but really in terms of recouping funds, you're not going to be recouping much. So the whole strategy of doing a theatrical release is most probably to promote the SVOD business model. Say, hey, we saw this in the cinema, let's watch it and create some advertising vibe about it. That's well worthwhile. But I really believe in the age of Marvel, of $300 million movies, and Disney, that really your little indie film competing on a P&A budget of what? Not much. You need to find other strategies for trying to get the film out there.
Yeah. So SVOD, for people who don't know.
SVOD is subscription video on demand.
Okay.
And so Netflix, Amazon Prime, Apple, that's where the power is. If you're looking at Netflix right now, they're doing a lot of indie stuff that used to be on cinema, and it's not there anymore, purely because it's just a better business model. So we're pretty much focused on doing SVOD.
And is it a good idea to try and get on all the platforms, or do you need exclusivity on kind of a single one, like just go for Netflix and Netflix only? Because
well, I think the big boys, Netflix, Amazon, and Apple, are only interested in exclusivity in a certain release window. So I don't think they're going to allow you. Oh, you're released on Amazon Prime. Maybe on a more mature sort of release cycle, maybe they will. I really don't know. I guess I'm still new in the process. Yet to find that out.
Yeah. Because I'm just thinking of, Netflix, where people are paying a subscription price and they're getting all of it, as opposed to iTunes or Prime, where you're actually paying individually to watch that film.
Yeah, I guess. Well, that's a good. You're right. I guess from what I've heard is Netflix pay production costs plus a certain percentage. I'm not sure what that is currently. Whereas with the other platforms, you're right, they're paying pay-per-view. And that remains to be seen how effective that is.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Obviously, Netflix is the biggest show in town in that respect, I believe. But there's a lot of competition there.
Yeah, okay. So where can people check out Yesterday's Girl then at the moment?
I think it's been released into UK and US. Oh, well, I know it's been released into UK, US on Amazon Prime. And other markets are being negotiated as we speak. I also think it got released into China, I think.
Okay.
It could be subject to censor restrictions, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, I guess from a little film that wasn't made for a lot of money, we're more than happy with what the results we've got.
Yeah, nice. So just going back to the China thing, do you have to do a separate edit for countries like China?
No, they do it.
Oh, they do
apparently.
Okay.
Yes.
And you have no control over what they...
Yeah, well, it's... Yes.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
So, and violence is an issue.
Okay.
Particularly for China, apparently. Apparently, someone said to me, the censors view it through the eyes of a 5-year-old.
Well, okay.
So if the violence is too confronting for a 5-year-old, then they're not going to let it through.
Okay. Yeah, I remember watching The Meg, and I think that was definitely made for a Chinese audience, because I've never seen so many people getting eaten by sharks and like hardly any blood. So
yeah, well, yeah, they're more like swallowed by sharks, aren't they? I think they're not. It's not. it's not like Jaws, like Spielberg's Jaws, where there's arms and
Yeah.
heads floating out of water and all that.
Yeah. No, that's
But
the fun stuff. That's the good stuff.
yeah, well, anyway, the Chinese censors frown down upon that apparently.
Okay.
Not that I know, because I don't speak Chinese or I can't view what they've done in China.
Right. Okay. Oh well, we'll have to see if it's out there somewhere. We'll get hold of it. So, what's next for you then?
What's next is we've got 2 or 3 projects trying to get off the ground, both genre films. I guess at the moment I'm doing genre because it seems to be a ready market for it. Whereas if you're going art house, then I think you're going to have issues with distribution, I believe, and this is me believing that you're going to have issues with distribution in who's going to pick it up. I mean, there's been some fantastic, beautiful films being made, but I'm not sure they're being picked up. So I guess I'm sort of deferring to what the marketplace wants. So that seems to be genre. And genre can, I mean, Yesterday's Girl was what we call the dystopian thriller. And so we know we can sell into that market again if we had to.
Yeah, nice. So is that at a stage of approaching funding bodies and things like that, just trying to get it off the ground?
No, well, see, my problem is because I'm a commercial director, people really, and I'm a little bit older than, the 20, 30-year-olds film school grads, they most probably need more runs on the boards. And commercials, despite doing significant numbers of commercials for significant multinational corporations, that they're not really that interested in you until you have some runs on the board in terms of IMDb credits or those sort of things. That's the other thing I would say is that people who are wanting to have conversations with the distributors or people, you need to brush up on your IMDb, because quite a few meetings I've gone into, they knew exactly who I was and they knew exactly what I'd done purely through IMDb.
Yeah, it's more powerful than people realize.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the indie game tend to say, oh, well, I'm not, it's really hard to update and all those sort of things, but it's well worth your time, particularly when you're fronting production companies or studios or those sort of things.
Yeah, I've had a lot of emails and inquiries just from people who are just finding my 2 films just on IMDb.
Yep.
So yeah, and I'm also, I don't think I'm going to make it to AFM this year, so I'm going to aim for Berlin next year. Have you been to Berlin?
I reckon Berlin could be fun. I'm hearing good things. I reckon your film could do all right.
Okay.
From what I'm hearing. Yeah. They do love an Australian film.
Ah.
So, but the question is it Australian or is it UK?
I'll have to
you'll have to brush up on your Aussie accent.
I'll just walk in my cork hat and that, and they'll love it.
Yeah, and then you'll say it with that accent. They go, yeah, it's just that'll really work.
They'll be like, "Who's this mongrel?"
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So, is Berlin a kind of similar format to AFM?
I haven't been. I've been to Cannes. I haven't been to Berlin.
Okay, how does Cannes work?
Cannes is big. It's a lot more. They're all about the art of cinema, I believe. So there's a lot more acceptance, I believe, of art house projects. They quite like that. AFM is, to me, is a bit like is very product driven. What's your genre? What's your product? Is it going to work? Whereas I guess Cannes, they talk a lot about the concept and those sort of things and the story, which is right. It's right. It's just a different way of doing business, and definitely worth going. Yeah.
And is Cannes a little more kind of tuxedos than, laptop bags and scooters?
Yeah, I guess the thing I noticed coming from Australia, American and Australian audiences are similar. We'll go to a cinema in shorts and a singlet and flip-flops, as they call it. it seems to me a lot more of an appreciation of cinema in Europe. To me, anyway, whether that's right or wrong, it's just a little Australian guy wandering around Cannes with it. And yes, I had to wear a tuxedo for first time in 20 years.
Yeah.
At Cannes.
Yeah. Nice.
I didn't have to do that at AFM.
No. Oh well, maybe at the carousel you could have put one on.
Yeah, and I would have stood out like a sore thumb. Yeah. Who is that? You know what? But
well, listen, Mike, this has been great. Some great tips in there and stuff, and it's good to hear your journey and stuff. And yeah, hopefully I'll get to see you in Berlin. Then maybe we can find
I'd love to. Yeah,
we can find a dive bar somewhere in the.
Dive bars are in. I'm not sure what the equivalent of a dive bar in Germany is. Maybe someone could suggest that. But and with some good local knowledge, I reckon we could suss some out.
Yeah, sounds good.
And we came up with some great ideas at the last one.
We did, yeah. Hopefully, still a chance they could happen. Who knows?
Yes, well, you never know. The big, wide, wonderful world of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, listen, this has been so good. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay, mate.
And yeah, have a good one, and good luck with all the future projects.
Yeah, fingers crossed and fingers in the ears.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Catch ya.
See ya. So there we have it. Some great insights there from Mike. Really appreciate him giving his time there today. And thank you all again for listening. And I really love when you leave comments and things like that. It gives me ideas of future episodes. And please, if you can, please leave a review. Reviews get us more viewers. The more viewers that we get, the more content we pump out, knowing that you're all out there and you're all listening. So thanks again for listening, and let's all help support indie film. See you next time.
Action, cut, and everything in between. A comprehensive guide to shooting a feature film, all on your own.